the purpose of this panel is you guys are all responsible for web analytics. Big companies, lots of data. You've got a serious budget, but you're reporting up to the CMO. What the heck do they want? So what I want to do is get some insights on what all of these people should be delivering. Sorry for having my back to you guys. That's what you get for sitting over way in the corner. I tried to get you in the front row. Did you not get the memo? So let me start off with a simple one. I mentioned this morning, different people have different communication styles. They receive information differently. Does your CMO want to see charts and graphs, want to see the spreadsheets, or just want you to tell them a story? Peter, let's start with you. And of course, start with a little bit of background about where you are in the organization.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Got a green light. How about now?
There you go.
Yeah? Yep, so my name is Peter Sanborn, and I manage web analytics for Microsoft's Windows business group. For those of you that work for large organizations that are built on top of very powerful and independent business groups, then you can share some of the joy and some of the pain that we have on Microsoft.com, because Microsoft is basically comprised of a series of businesses within businesses. And the business model is run your business and generate lots of value, and don't be too overly concerned with how the different businesses connect to each other. Of course, I'm being a little bit facetious because that's not exactly how we run it from a customer-facing perspective, but from an infrastructure perspective, when you're really behind the scenes looking at the data layer of the organization, you can see how the organization really grew up as these very strong independent businesses. I think in terms of reporting to executives, Jim asked me to be on this panel a couple of months ago, and it was at first it was just a no-brainer, and I thought, well, of course I know what executives are interested in. And then I started to think about it a little bit more, and I realized I've actually never gone and sat down with one of our executives and asked them the question so generally, what is it that you want out of web analytics? One of the things specific to your question, Jim, that I did hear is consistency. And the delivering of analytics, particularly web analytics, at least within our environment, and I think within others, sometimes it's done in a very one-off fashion. Like when you do web analytics for an executive audience, that's when you're doing the deep dive of web analytics. But it's not integrated into a consistent part of the reporting that, the executives that I was talking to at least were looking at on a regular basis.
And let's pick one, the one that you can think of, sort of the highest ranking marketing person, executive that is in your direct chain of command. What's the best way to communicate with them? Is it graphical? Is it numerical? Is it textual? Is it story? Is it graphs?
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think the format matters as much as the substance. The best way to communicate is to understand what's on their scorecard and map the metrics that you're trying to communicate, the ideas that you're trying to promote, map it back to whatever is on their scorecard.
Perfect. Thank you. Michael, let me ask you, Cisco got big fast through acquisition. Mm-hmm. One of the stories was when you're acquired by Cisco, you give up all your systems and you are assimilated. You're responsible for lots of people. I assume they're fairly spread out. Right. What does the organization look like? Just give us a quick map.
Sure. Am I on?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So first a correction. There are 120 people who manage Cisco's web properties that report up to me, but there's a much smaller and high-powered team of analytics folks who are sitting here, some of whom who are sitting here with us. So we wish we had 120 people. But let me, if I could, not answer your question yet, and answer the question of what the CMO wants. I've been doing this job for about 7 years now, and we're on the third CMO. We just got a new CMO at Cisco. And I'm not sure that CMOs are that much interested in analytics, to be perfectly honest. They're always interested in a good story, and I think out of politeness, I've at least had conversations about our analytics with each CMO. But where we are now is on the cusp of some very exciting new technologies and capabilities. You and I spoke about these on the phone that have to do with predictive modeling based on web analytics. So being able to identify big sales opportunities based on the web traffic of the employees of those companies on the website. I think that's probably the most exciting thing that to a CMO that we've ever raised. And it's not because they don't find analytics interesting or it's endlessly fascinating. We all know that, but it doesn't tie directly to their business goals quite frequently. The CMO who's in place right now is focused first and foremost on building bridges to the sales organization, on actually driving growth, not just in vague sorts of ways of extending the brand or educating the customers, but in taking demand generation to a level that it hasn't been before with our new capabilities in web analytics. So if you'd like me to answer the second question, I would, but I wanted to get that in before we go too far.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay.
So,
the organization.
Yes.
We have a centralized organization. Years and years ago, I think Cisco probably was more like Microsoft in that we do have 45, 50 different business units. But about 7 or 8 years ago, those were centralized and pulled together. All the web publishing, everything from user experience to the overall design to the analytics, et cetera, is all pulled together in a centralized organization. We're responsible for 85 countries, 45 languages, and we are, to whatever degree Cisco is represented on the web, the central corporate organization is responsible for that.
And your group is the Web Analytics Center of Excellence, and you support many business units?
Well, I guess we're the closest thing to a center of excellence that we have. Okay. We've got a lot of room for learning and growth, but yes, we support, we have a central budget, we provide a baseline of services to all groups, and then on a client-funded basis, we provide additional services too. And
how is your progress evaluated? What's on your scorecard?
It depends on the CMO. So there was a period in Cisco's recent history where the CMO's #1 priority was brand extension, getting the market to think more about Cisco than simply the phone closet and the plumbing for the network, getting to think of Cisco as more of a consumer as well as an SMB player in the marketplace. And we had to represent that with the website. So we spent a lot of time taking the Human Network campaign, which launched 4 or 5 years ago, and integrating that down through everything on the website, everything from the home page down through the routers and switches models pages down below. So at one point in time, that was very important. Now, what is much more important in these challenging economic times is demonstrating value around the bottom line, actually showing revenue opportunities and working closer with the sales organization.
Great, thank you. Dylan, let me ask you, your 6th tax season, we're assuming you're a company that's run by the numbers.
Yes, absolutely. It is a very data-driven company.
And is that all that they listen to? Are they only focused on how the needle moves on the gauge? How do you communicate upstairs? And again, start with how the company is organized. Where do you sit?
Great. So I sit in the marketing group. I sit in a team called the web team. In our group is web analytics, and we actually do analytics and site optimization, program management, So managing the programs, requests coming in from our marketing partners, and then manage them across the website. Development and QA, so I sit right next to developers, the people that are putting the tags in. I sit right next to them, people that are building the code that goes on the site for the tests, right next to those people. And then the creative folks are also in that group too. And so we sit in a team area, and we actually interact really well with one another. This year, no, most years. And in a team area, we actually throw stuff at each other, and there's dart guns and all sorts of wonderful stuff there that goes on. But it makes it so that we're really fast moving. So if we need to go and talk to a developer, I go and talk to the person who's sitting right to the left of me. And so we're able to get a lot of things done really, really quickly and really, really efficiently in that particular matter. The Web Analytics and Optimization group that I sit in is responsible for the marketing site and some of the product analytics that happen as well, and then some of the customer support metrics that happen as well. But we are a distributed analytics team. So the online advertising analytics is actually sitting with the online advertising team. The customer support analytics team that goes deeper than just this testing piece sits over in the customer support area. The business analytics team sits in the cube right behind me. And so we are a distributed team. And so I'm focused just on site analytics and optimization. In order to best interact and communicate with my C-level organization, I tell them where we're at, where we've been, and what tests we're running right now that will help us get to the next level. We also, if we have any problems on the site, we use something called a hypothesis tree. Here's what we see. Here are all of our hypotheses that we believe why we're seeing that. And then we assign different analysts that go after each one of those different hypotheses and then report back in. And then that way it allows us to tell the story on here's what we see, and here's why we're seeing it, and here's what we tried but didn't actually work. Because that allows us to really understand what the customers are doing on our site.
It sounds like you've got a well-supported group. In other words, because people want to measure everything,
yep.
And your business is the website.
Yep.
That's what they care about. And it sounds like you're, I would like to say fairly well-supported, although I know everybody's asking for more than you can deliver. But it sounds like you've got a good-sized team doing the work. It
fluctuates greatly during the tax season. So we have full-time people, and then during the tax season, we bulk up with vendors and then go back down. So it allows us to flex and flux quite well in that period of time.
Great, thanks. Brandon, so where do you sit? What do you do? And then then we'll take it. Then I'll ask the next one. Let's start with what department, division? Where do you live?
Yeah, great. So first off, I don't see my CMO in here. If he happens to be in here, I'm sure I'll be looking for work later, so you guys can look me up. So I sit under the direct commerce team at Sony. We sell all of the electronics, TVs, laptops, cameras, minus PlayStation. That's run out of a different division, and we support both online and offline channels. Sony is a wholesaler retailer, right? Traditional wholesaler that's been moving into the retail business, and actually my history, I've also, when I was at Nike, it was the same. It was a wholesaler retailer. So my first interactions with the CMO was I got this email, and it said, important email, and it said basically I need 10 numbers from you an hour ago. And I produced those numbers, and some of them were positive, some of them weren't. And the CMO chose which numbers made them look good, had the press conference, and we kind of went from there, right? And so that's how it started. And that's not necessarily a great cycle to be in. In terms of how to communicate to a CMO, when I was at Nike, the people there were very, very creative, not data focused. And so I would say pretty pictures always help to do the telling of the story. At Sony, it's more engineers and people who have maybe more of a data background. So just genetically, they're engineered to like data and want more data. And so numbers can work there. I would say, though, as long as you're telling that positive story in terms of the CMO is hearing what they want to hear, it almost doesn't matter what format you give it to them, they're going to be happy. It turns out it becomes critical, in my opinion, when you tell a story that they may not be as happy with. And laying out a graph or laying out numbers, I've had instances where they'll start to call into question your integrity and accuracy of those numbers because it goes against what they want. And so in scenarios like that, I've actually been more successful in storytelling and handling it in a different fashion when I knew it was going to be a very sensitive topic.
This is sort of a pop question for anybody who wants to grab it first. When somebody walks into my office with a spreadsheet in their hand, It's not that I'm intimidated, it's just numbers, but it's a judgment. It's a value being placed on my work. How are you viewed within the organization from the dotted line sideways? The people you're supporting, the people you're trying to help optimize, do they welcome you or are they hesitant to let you into their office?
I think more data is always welcomed, generally speaking. Yeah, more is better.
And
even if it's unflattering.
Not pretty.
Yeah, even if it's not pretty. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to pay any attention to it, and they may, they may spin it. Yeah. But I think that generally speaking, people would rather have more knowledge than less, and then may choose to do something with it or not. We've got one data point that we resurrect about every other year, where we published an enormous amount of content. We've got highly technical products. A lot of content goes out. Much more content than is necessary. But like the old advertising adage, you're never quite sure which half you shouldn't be publishing. But after every big launch, occasionally after a launch, we'll do an analysis that shows, surprise, surprise, an 80-20 rule. 80% of the visitors went to 20% of the content, and guess what? At the other end of things, a significant amount of content was never used at all. That study gets resurrected about every 2 or 3 years, and everybody's just shocked and stunned and decides to cut back on the amount of content until the next launch. So sometimes the data is educational, but not useful at the same time.
Interesting. And this is like an 18-month cycle?
2 years, maybe. 2 years? Yeah.
Well, my experience has been that marketers, site managers, yeah, they definitely want the data. They are interested in the data. They want to know what's working. They want to know what's not working. But generally, they don't think about it until about a month after the campaign's gone live. And I think really the challenge from a practitioner standpoint, people that practice analytics, is really kind of getting front of mind in the planning process so that you can design your data strategy in the same way that they're designing their marketing strategy, so that you can answer the questions once the thing cracks open and goes live. That's always been my team's biggest challenge.
I'd like to focus on that. And again, question for anybody, what's the best way to really enthuse people and entice them and get them to think in advance? I mean, do you do brown bag lunches? Do you send out memos? Do you have senior managers get up and hit people with sticks? What's the best way to get people to understand the value?
Oh, sticks, I haven't tried that yet. We have an email distribution list when we have tests that go out and tests that are on there, and we put everybody on there that possibly could ever be on there, so they're aware of what's going on the site. And our general manager talks about testing. Our VP of marketing talks about testing. We talk about testing a lot, and so it's got a lot of organizational momentum behind it. And that started out with us being able to make the right decisions for the business. And so people now pay attention to it. So it's got lots of support.
Again, I'm reminded that your website is your product.
Yes,
I mean,
we had 13 million people finish our web application product last year during the tax season. So lots and lots of people come to our site.
And then therefore it's worth pointing out that the fact that you were able to escape from your cage right now in the middle of tax time, thank you very much for coming.
You're very welcome.
What about at Sony? How do you get people to pay attention?
Yeah, so one of our strategies, one of the things that we do is we don't just pump out data, right? And people then are afraid or happy that their scorecard's going to come in and they're either going to be the heroes of the day or they're going to be, the slum dogs and get in trouble with everyone. So before we send out a lot of these types of data that we know have bigger business impacts, we actually work with the business units and make them stakeholders. We actually allow them to help us generate insights rather than an analyst who understands the number but maybe not has a firm grasp of the business. We'll work with them to jointly develop the insights. And that way they feel like they're a part of the process. And they're much more enthused once numbers come out, right? And in the case of negative numbers or things like that, we'll often work to come up with ways to make the best of the bad situation so they can save face, as it were, and still be excited about data.
Yeah, one of the things that we did that was successful within the Windows Business Group is that every organization, no matter how big or small, has a planning process, has a strategic planning process, and some are more chaotic than others, but there's always a process. So figuring out ways that you can get at the headwaters of that process and positioning yourself not as the reporting person, but as the person that is going to help them measure the performance of whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And we've even developed a analytics process within our planning process, which the first thing that we do is we act in a consulting role to not to tell our stakeholders what their performance metrics should be, but to ask them. And then throughout the course of the campaign or the site, to kind of keep putting that back up to them as their metrics, things that they own, and things that they're going to have a vested interest in, because it was something that they decided very early on in the planning stages.
How do you discover projects and programs and campaigns that are about to start so you know when to get involved?
Yeah, part of that is integrating into the process, and part of that is kind of what everybody was talking about, which is just promoting awareness. We recently started being much more active in terms of basically marketing what analytics is all about. Storytelling is really a critical component to that, and you know, we've looked at different storytelling techniques. And analysts, when I first started talking to my team about the concept of storytelling, it kind of scares the hell out of them, because they think of storytelling as like fairy tales, or they think of storytelling as like making up stories, which is completely antithetical to what how an analyst thinks about things. But really, the data is not going to speak for itself. And so you're the voice that kind of brings the data to life. And whether it's through blogging, or whether it's through case studies, or whether it's just going out to your stakeholders' team meetings and asking the people that manage those teams, hey, can I just come in and talk to your team for 10 minutes about some great thing that just happened that we did with your team? All of those different ways that you can just get top of mind, and so that the organization starts to say, you don't start to say, the organization starts to say, before we do anything that's requiring serious investment, we're going to have very clear KPIs, and we're going to have a very clear data plan to go with it.
I think there's another element here, which is data versus business knowledge. You know, it's one thing to run data reports. You know, so many people come in looking at this page, that page, but if someone kind of takes that information to the next level and says to the client or the owner of that site area, here's what I can tell you about your business based on the analytics itself. I think that's taking the discipline to another step, which is really, really important. And the last thing I need when I have a question, frankly, is data. I need what's the business story that's going on here? What's the implication of this? How is this helping or hurting, or what's the real story that's going on here?
What do you guys find as the, when you get the enthused individual, the business unit that says, great, give me more numbers, I really want to get involved in more testing, or I really care about the results of this campaign, can you tell me more and more and more, and oh, well now it's time to go out and get more tools or more resources. What's that process like as far as going upstairs with your hat in your hand and saying, please sir, may I have some more? How do you do that?
I'll go. You know, I think that's probably one of the most important things you can do, right, as running an analytics team is to get that executive buy-in and to get that funding. When I started at Sony, I didn't have an analytics budget, and the tools that we had were paid for, but we had no money for other tools. And I came in there, I was able to articulate a vision and a strategy to our senior management and get them to really buy in to what that vision was on where I believed we needed to be for analytics. Once they bought in at that level, it was really just finding the tools and then properly coming up with ROIs for those tools. And I was able to actually fund a couple different projects last year that I ended up having to cancel other people's projects. That's not a way to win friends and influence people, maybe, in the long term, but in the short term...
You stole their money.
Yes. Bake sales, those work too. Bake sales.
So what we do is we keep track of how much we spend on our vendor that we flex with and figure out what it would cost in order to have a full-time employee during that same period of time. And so as the needs come in and the requests come in, the vendor flexes a little bit up, and then at some point you reach a point of equilibrium where it's actually more cost-effective to have a full-time employee than it is to have a vendor.
So literally by the numbers.
Yeah.
One thing we've done, we have this propensity to buy modeling based on analytics initiative underway right now, and we built it into our FY12 planning, asking for incremental funding with, at best a 50-50 chance in these times of getting it. But what we've done to sort of role model a bit is shifted resources internally within my own group to say we're going to stop doing a little bit of this over here, we're going to put some of that funding over here, demonstrating results, demonstrating impact, the business impact that the CMO is looking for, that kind of sends the message, well, if they're willing to put their own skin in the game, obviously there must really be something here worth paying attention to.
One of the things we found is that the observation is that people that tend to really like tools are kind of like people that really like sports cars, like every couple of years, time to get another one. And so sometimes we have the reverse problem, not us going to our executive team and requesting money for a new tool, but the executive team saying, hey, I just went to this conference and I learned about this tool and it's really cool and we should start using it. And so our bigger challenge is less around, sure we have to justify to get funding and there's different ways that we do that, but it's more us trying to justify the value of consistency and sticking with the tools that we currently have, no matter how imperfect you may think that they are, and that is really where the investment needs to be made, is building out a consistent infrastructure that's going to give you a year-over-year analytics program, comparable metrics, and something that it takes an organization, at least the size of these organizations, it takes an organization just 2 years to figure the tool out and figure out how to use the tool and get everybody trained on it. So for us, it's more about avoiding the bright, shiny object tool that somebody just got sold on, because we need to make the investment in the tools that we already have.
Speaking of bright, shiny objects, have you had senior managers come to you and executives say, ooh, social media, we need to be measuring the Facebook?
You've seen the movie at least, so that's good.
Management by In-Flight magazine. How do you respond?
How do we what?
How do you respond when they ask
for
the next shiny new thing?
If you're not measuring social media today, you're probably not doing your job. But putting it in its proper place in the greater scheme of things, I think, is also part of the job. So one of the things that I see us struggling with as an industry is measuring the business impact of social media. It reminds me of the Web 2.0 era about 3-4 years ago, when there was so much excitement in a new 2.0 company every other week, a new product, new technology, a line outside my door wanting to tell me about the latest, greatest things while I was online seeing all the latest, greatest stuff. But the pervasive question was, what good is this? How is this going to drive business? And it took quite a while to figure that out, to get people to interact and, in our case, connect them with resellers or click to chat about a product or actually offer pricing and that sort of thing, the ways that we clearly could connect it to the bottom line. I kind of feel like that's where we are with the social media thing right now, is there's so much excitement, there's so much apparent value, and I have no doubt that it will show itself sooner or later, so we don't really have a choice about moving into it. But the attachment to the bottom line is tenuous at best right now, my sense. But you got to pay attention to it.
I think there's a bigger theme going on there, and clearly social media is one of them, but you get CMOs who get like a flavor of the month, right? And they'll come to you and say, oh, my buddy over at this other company, they were tracking this. This is something we need to be tracking, right? And implementation is kind of the least sexy part, or at least it used to be, of the analytics world. It takes all this money and all this time to get implemented and come up with a strategy and the report suite structure and all those different pieces. And And so that at Sony, that was one of the pieces that we identified we needed to change the model on, because I'm simply not able to change my CMO to stop wanting flavors of the month. So instead of trying to change him, we decided that we would change the way that we do business. And one of the things that we've been using that has been super helpful for us is tag management. So we're able to significantly reduce our times to roll out new types of things that CMO cares about.
So if somebody says, I want to see these numbers and these numbers, you've got a system in place that'll let you put the tags in where you need, when you need.
Yeah, yep, exactly. And the speed is really the speed and the cost is really the critical part of that.
We have Microsoft, Cisco, Intuit, and Sony heads of web analytics. If you've got a question, now is an excellent time. And first question over here.